try to get it back and going, but they say that's going to be a long process. And finally, their drinking water source. They're looking at seeing when they can get that back online. And in the meantime, they're hoping to get potable water up and going so that when people can come back, they will have fresh drinking water. So there's a lot of moving parts behind the scenes here in Merritt.
Yeah, a lot of complex things piling on top of each other before people can actually get into the city. I know people always want to stay back and protect their home, protect what is closest to them. You've been speaking with some of those residents. What are they saying?
But speaking to some people in line here that are hoping to get back in and be allowed to go and see their homes and maybe pick up some medication or some other essentials if they're going to be out for a long time, they're eager to see what their house looks like, if it is completely flooded or what they're able to salvage. And it's going to be different depending on the area of the city that they're in. The CBC has also spoken to people who live just outside of Merritt that have faced devastating loss. We talked to a couple, Pam and Paul Velt, who have experienced a severe flooding in their home. Let's have a listen.
It was devastating. I thought we were going to lose our lives trying to save our own property. And then it was like, we've lived through COVID, we've lived through the fires, and we'll live through this. But my son has gone down to the property and he's found our stuff is scattered everywhere. And we'll try and get some of the stuff back if we can.
And Anita, I spoke to Pam shortly after that interview. She's trying to get to her house to see what is left. And she was staying with her father in Merritt, who had decided not to leave. So her and her husband are trying to get to their home, knowing that they won't be able to get back to their father's house in Merritt. They're not allowing people back in once they've been out, and so they will be seeking shelter with friends somewhere else.
Just devastating. The CBC's Brady Strachan reporting live from Merritt today. Thanks, Brady. And we will be speaking with the mayor of Merritt coming up at about 12:30 Pacific. That's 3:30 Eastern time.
And we'll definitely be keen to listen to that. Anita, thank you. The CBC's Sarah Galashan joins us now from Coquitlam, BC. And Sarah, there are a lot of different threads here. One of the most urgent is the situation south of Chilliwack. There's still a search ongoing for missing people who may be trapped in the debris. Tell us what we know about that.
You know, we have spoken to the RCMP today. As of 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, the situation is status quo. And that's the last update that we got from them, in that there is still the one confirmed death of a woman. They believe there are at least 2 people missing, and they continue to reiterate that call to anyone who might have not heard from a loved one, a friend who could have possibly been in that area on Monday when that landslide occurred prior to 11 a.m. Monday morning. For those unfamiliar with this area, and certainly it could be the case in British Columbia itself that you might not be familiar with this area because it is fairly remote. It's an area that is south of Chilliwack, as I say, north of Whistler and north of Pemberton, in fact. And that's where this slide occurred. Fairly remote, not heavily trafficked or heavily traveled highway necessarily, but certainly were a number of cars we know on the road at the time that this occurred. And so they are asking for anyone with any information about someone who might be missing up there to get in touch with the RCMP. CBC spoke with the mayor of Chilliwack about the ongoing search, and this is what he had to say.
We'll be looking at helicopters and the search dogs and search and rescue from both Pemberton and Chilliwack. Going through the debris field, which is very sensitive because it's a high-risk area, and we certainly don't want to see any more injuries or the like. And obviously, we're aware that at least 2 more people are missing, a number of the vehicles, and the urgency is to locate us as soon, as quickly as possible, and as safely as possible.
And that point he's making about the debris field being both dangerous and difficult to search, that cannot be stressed enough. It's trained search and rescue crews that are right now involved in this search, and it's difficult in particular because, Andrew and Anita, they don't know obviously where these vehicles that the people might have been in either went off the road or became engulfed by the debris.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at the image of that house that was just sort of taken away by the rushing waters so quickly. Who knows where it ended up? That just gives you an idea of just how devastating this has been. Hope has been housing hundreds of stranded travelers. Sarah, what's the latest there?
We're talking about 1,100 people right now who are, stranded in Hope. They were either traveling south of or north of Hope. Hope is the city where all of the highways sort of intersect, either to go south or north within the province. Normally, it's a place that you would stop, fuel up, and get a bite to eat. Instead, it's where these 1,100 travelers are having to sleep. They are sleeping in the high school gym. They're sleeping in churches. Some residents have opened their doors. It's a population normally of about 6,000, so it's a substantial increase in terms of the number of people living there. Some of them obviously temporarily. They've flown in food. They've flown in cots, but all of these travelers obviously hanging on any word of when a highway access might open up to them. What we heard yesterday is that it might be Highway 7, which is the low heat highway, some kind of an access route south from Hope at some point. We've heard from the Chilliwack mayor. Maybe that's going to happen later today. We will be certainly listening for that from the public safety minister and Premier John Horgan a little later this hour. But highway access is a big thing for those who are right now stranded in Hope. It's a big thing for everyone in the entire province.
Yeah, and Sarah, we already heard from Merritt, but nearby in Princeton, evacuation orders have lifted. What more are we hearing on that?
Well, so they've lifted and people are allowed to go back into their homes to perhaps survey the damage. In many cases, they can't actually move back into their homes. There's still no heat. The natural gas lines have not been restored. And there's really no water. It's a boil water advisory right now. Rhonda Warner is someone that CBC News Network spoke with earlier. She went back to survey the damage, can't move in. There's still water in her basement, and it's affecting the furnace in her home, which, of course, is not providing any heat anyway. But she spoke about having to evacuate so quickly, and as that water was rising, what that was like for her scariest moment. And I want to play that. I'm sorry, we don't have that, but she does describe the panic, as you can imagine, as that water was rising very quickly because a dike had breached in Princeton. At any rate, it is just one of the communities right now that is struggling with so much water. The pictures so dramatic that we've been showing and will obviously continue to show. And it's going to continue to be this case in the coming days. Andrew, Anita?
All right, Sarah, thank you.
Let's bring in the CBC senior meteorologist Johanna Wagstaff now live from Vancouver. Johanna, obviously a lot is banking on the weather in the coming days. It could make or break the situation, I'm assuming.
Have resulted from this extreme rain. We are seeing sunshine now across southern BC. This is the forecast we need, even if it's only for a few days. I want to show you the latest satellite and radar map. We just happen to be between two low pressure systems. There is heavy rain to our north and heavy rain hitting Oregon tonight, but high pressure means generally dry conditions from the lower mainland all the way across to the interior. And as we've heard from our team on the ground, we're really dealing with two sets of disasters. There's the landslides, the mudslides, the debris flow resulting in highways cut off. And then there's the overland flooding. So I just want to take you down to that because while we do have multiple flood watches, high stream advisories, and some flood warnings still in place, water levels are beginning to recede. But I want to take you to Abbotsford, where, as you've heard, communities between Abbotsford and Chilliwack at risk of the Burrowtown pump station. I've just put on a couple of locators. You can see the river to the south. That's the Nooksack River. To the north is the Fraser River, and then Chilliwack River runs off that. So the Nooksack River doesn't actually come up across the border, but this is a location of an old lake, the former Sumas Lake, that runs across the border. So a lot of talk from the mayor, from officials about the Nooksack Lake water levels, even though it's south of the border. The watershed crosses north into British Columbia, and that's why there's been so much concern about water levels dropping. And Anita and Andrew, we haven't had a real handle on those gauges because they were inundated on Monday. We don't have the data we need for accurate modeling. However, generally after 48 hours from a big event, we start to see water levels drop, and that has been the general story across all of our rivers. They are slowly beginning to drop today.
That's what we're hearing. I just got a text from someone on the ground in Abbotsford who said he's really noticed a big difference in the water levels just, by looking out over Abbotsford. Now, BC has had a rough year. We've seen a deadly heat dome, wildfires, and now this. You really can't talk about any of it without mentioning climate change. So can you tell us more about that role of climate change in this unprecedented flooding?
Anita, this is a climate change infused weather event. We get these atmospheric rivers on the west coast. In fact, this is how water is transported from the equator northward. But climate change has already made these events more frequent and more intense. And in fact, according to the latest IPCC science report, that's that UN report leading into the COP26 climate change talk. There's a whole section on how these atmospheric river events have gotten worse and will continue to. Some modeling putting that at 50% increase in intensity of these events by the end of the century. On top of that, Anita, we have to talk about the heat dome and the wildfires. Many areas near these flooded rivers saw the unprecedented wildfires this season. That means soil can easily run off, leading to those mudslides and debris flows. On top of that, the heat stress from the dome, Anita, meant that what trees do remain easily give way and isn't holding that soil together. So all of these events connected, and unfortunately, this is a window into our warming future.
CBC's Johanna Wagstaff in Vancouver. Thanks, Joe.
That fire is basically, it started in an RV dealership, and there's a number of RVs on fire.
That was Chief Darren Lee from the Abbotsford Fire Rescue Service. As you heard, in addition to coping with flooding and landslides, officials are now battling a raging fire at an RV dealership. About 100 tightly packed RVs are on fire at the dealership not far from the flooded out highway. More than 36 firefighters are battling the flames. Officials say they're concerned about the fire's proximity to a nearby propane filling station and an overhead power line. CBC News spoke earlier with Courtney Davey. She's a resident of Abbotsford, BC, and lives on the emergency evacuation route. This morning, she woke up to the sound of fire trucks just behind her home. Here's how she described the situation there right now.
Basically, I live right behind to the left of the smoke over there, just a street above where all the flooding is. We didn't hear anything going on this morning until I looked outside like usual, and there's smoke barreling up into the sky. Then I turned the news on because I knew something was wrong. As well, I live on the emergency evacuation route, so there was 10, 15 fire trucks flying down the road, sirens on, and so we knew something was really bad. That's been, it's just been getting worse. Like last night we got that emergency evacuation notification, and we didn't know what to do. We got that at about 8:30, and everybody's freaking out because it's detrimental. It's devastating to everybody. The farms, all the animals lost, everybody's losing their homes, and there's really no relief and no information. So it's been really upsetting and scary.
That was a resident of Abbotsford, Courtney Davey, speaking with us earlier today. Now, as we mentioned, Merritt residents have been advised to evacuate to Kamloops or Kelowna. In Kamloops, an evacuee reception center has been set up at MacArthur Island. Shelley Joyce is the host of CBC Radio's Daybreak Kamloops and has the latest from there.
Well, we're standing right now actually in front of the event center where people have been lined up over the last couple of days from Merritt. As you mentioned, a community of 7,000 people. And I think there's just so much frustration and despair. And I mean, as you know, we went through a very smoky summer season with wildfires and evacuations. And this has just really pushed people over the edge. I'm standing next to Kelly Donaldson. She is from Merritt. I just ran into her here in the parking lot about a half an hour ago. She was with her mother-in-law who is ill, 3 children who they've all been evacuated. And what's this been like for you, Kelly? I can even see tears in your eyes. It's a really emotional time.
Oh, of course. It's been a wild few days. We're feeling fortunate even though we've been evacuated. Our house is still standing and we will go home to it eventually. My mother-in-law is a different case, but she has our support. There's not much at this point that ESS can do for her, so we're just trying to get her to a safe and stable place at this point, and take our dog with her. So that's been my priority for the last 24 hours. She's on the road now, but yeah, it's obviously been a tough few days.
Have you been able to get any help here in Kamloops from this center? I know
I haven't been accessing it. I'm good. I've got a lot of support. I've got resources. I'm in a good position. But people like my mother-in-law who need services such as this. It was a bit surprising this morning that it's kind of a wait game right now, and we need her to go somewhere where she can be safe.
What's this been like for your kids? You've got 3 kids.
3 kids. Yeah. I mean, they're fine. They've been in a hotel before. They're confused. They obviously want to go home. They're worried about their friends. They're worried about their teachers. They're worried about their schools. But like I said, we have a house to go home to, so we're just trying to focus on that and enjoy this extra special time we get together once again after a wild 20 months. So
is there anything we could do for you as a community, as the community of Kamloops?
Oh, Kamloops has been wonderful. They're doing everything they can. I know this. It's obvious. The grocery stores need food. I guess that's my only comment at this point. I want a banana.
Yeah, no fresh fruit or veggies in our grocery stores right now, and the bread is gone, as are the meat supplies. I think people are just sort of panic buying.
Of course,
yes,
it's expected. We've been here before. It's starting to feel like the new normal. So
anyway, thanks so much for making some time to talk to
us. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And most of what I've heard from other folks here, very similar to what Kelly just said, just devastated and impatient and fed up, really.
Shelley Joy speaking to us earlier. She is the host of CBC Radio's Daybreak Kamloops.
Yeah, and Andrew, the people of Kamloops have been coming together all year to help during every disaster that has hit this province. It really has been a hub for community inspiration. Okay, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in Washington ahead of tomorrow's meeting with the U.S. and Mexican presidents. Today, he has been speaking at the Wilson Center, a D.C. think tank, but he began by talking about the disaster here in B.C.
I want people to know, first of all, that the federal government has been engaging with the local authorities, with the province. I spoke with the Premier, I spoke with a number of mayors last night to talk about how people are doing in this terrifically bad situation. We're also working with them on saving people, on sending resources like the Canadian Armed Forces to support people in this situation, but also we'll be there for the cleanup and the rebuilding after the impacts of these extreme weather events. It's really going to be important that Canadians continue to do what we do, which is being there for each other in this difficult situation, and we will continue to be.
The CBC's Lindsay Duncombe joins me now with more on Ottawa's offer of help for BC. Lindsay, what is the federal government preparing to do?
Aircraft, Anita, and those planes and the people who are on them will have 2 main jobs. That is to move people should there be additional evacuations or if people are trapped, and to support supply chains, getting goods, food and water to people who need it. So maybe some vegetables and meat for the folks that we were talking to in Kamloops who have those empty grocery store shelves. In terms of the specifics, where are they coming from? Where will these operations go to? How many aircraft? How many personnel? We are still waiting for details from the Department of National Defense. They say that those details are being worked out and they'll let us know as soon as it is possible to do so. We first learned of this in a tweet from Bill Blair. He's the Federal Minister of Emergency Preparedness. Here's what he said, Anita. He said that in response to the extreme flooding across southern BC, we have approved the deployment of Canadian Forces air support personnel to assist with evacuation efforts, support those supply chain routes, and protect residents against floods and landslides. He goes on to say he spoke with the BC Public Safety Minister, Mike Farnworth, letting him know that we stand with British Columbians during this extremely difficult time and are working hard to provide support needed as soon as possible. Now, Mike Farnworth, as well as provincial cabinet ministers in British Columbia, Columbia are meeting or met earlier today in an emergency cabinet meeting. One of the things being discussed there was whether it is necessary or beneficial to declare a provincial state of emergency. As he was going into that meeting, the Minister of Public Safety stopped and talked to us.
I just want to take this opportunity to give a quick update in the situation in Abbotsford that was taking place last night, and in particular to praise the leadership of Mayor Braun and the emergency crews in being able to respond to the situation with the Barrowtown pumping station and ensuring that evacuations that were required took place. I also want to thank the cooperation from the federal government. I was in conversations yesterday with Minister Blair.
Now, Lindsay, there's been a lot of criticism over the way the province has been responding to this disaster. Some saying they should have played a bigger role, even sending out an emergency alert. Talk about that. What's behind all of that?
Well, at every news conference, when we have heard from provincial officials, there have been questions about why wasn't there a stronger warning leading up to these events? Did people need to know what was coming? And the response from the minister has been that there were warnings from Environment Canada, that social media was active in the lead up to it, and that this was an unprecedented event. But, you know, there's a lot of weather in British Columbia, and there's a lot of weather warnings in British Columbia, and this was obviously something that was different. The idea of an emergency alert is something that happens in other provinces and is in the works in British Columbia. No one's phone buzzed saying that a flood was coming, and even last night that didn't happen in Abbotsford, although the mayor there has said that was a municipal call. The city did not want to let the 300 people they were worried about know in that manner because it would have alerted thousands in other places.
The CBC's Lindsay Duncombe in Vancouver. Thanks, Lindsay.
These are the latest aerial shots of Merritt, BC. The entire population of more than 7,000 people remains under an evacuation order. City officials say that will not change until they get the drinking water situation under control. The wastewater treatment plant isn't operating due to the flooding, and officials say it poses an immediate danger to public health and safety. It's expected to take until at least the end of this week to resolve that issue. People who stayed behind in Merritt throughout the floods are strongly encouraged to go to Kamloops or Kelowna until the evacuation orders are lifted. And Merritt Mayor Linda Brown joins me now. So Mayor Brown, thank you for taking the time during what has got to be a very difficult time. What's the latest information you can give us about the situation in your city?
Well, thank you for asking me to talk about it. The latest information is we have unclean water and we have a wastewater treatment plant that needs to be safe for residents to come back home. That is our number one priority, to ensure we have safe water and drinking water available, and the ability to use toilets. That's simple.
Might be losing you there, but I just want to know, you know, you're talking about we need that clean drinking water to make sure that people can actually come back and live in the town of Merritt. But will residents have the opportunity to go back and assess the damage to their properties anytime soon?
We have experts in the field working right now. We have consultants, professionals of every kind to test and repair both our water and wastewater system, but also our entire infrastructure. It's not safe for residents to come back and do their own assessment at this point in time. We really rely on the experts to do.
We had Chilliwack Mayor Ken Popoff on our network earlier. He told us he had been in touch with Prime Minister Trudeau. I'm wondering if the federal government has reached out to you as well.
I have personally spoken with both Premier Horgan and Prime Minister Trudeau. They both expressed their thoughts and respect for the resiliency of their residents, but they've also committed to standing in Merritt, supporting us in both the immediate and the long-term needs of this community. So we are really counting on.
And we appreciate Mayor Brown, you speaking. We're just having a little bit of audio problems, but we did definitely get the gist of what you were saying. Thank you. That was Linda Brown, the Mayor of Merritt, British Columbia.
Now, the personal losses in BC have been huge. Paul and Pam Velt, they live in Merritt. They spoke with my colleague Heather Hiscox earlier from temporary lodgings. They described what they woke up to on Monday morning and what's happened to them since then.
The bottom field started to flood. My son and I were starting to sandbag, and it just got worse and worse, and we were driving through several feet of water, trying to sandbag and save everything we could.
Okay, just pause for just a second, Pam. Tell me about your property. Tell me what you were. So you're close to the river, starts to come up, and then tell me about what your property is.
Yeah, so we live right on a river. We have a couple acres. We have barns, chicken coops, workshops, houses. Yeah.
But at 7:30 in the morning, the water started to rise. We're looking at images of it now. This is pre. And the water, how fast did it go, Paul?
Oh, unbelievable. Crazy.
It was like 1 minute we were sandbagging, I looked up, and we were completely surrounded in water, and debris and things of our property were floating by us. Yeah, it was awful.
I know I was in trouble.
Yeah.
So
and there's nothing nobody could do.
Okay, so you're trying to sandbag, that's futile. And what did you do? Then you went to higher ground and to safety?
Yes.
Yeah, our house, we started to see that it started to erode underneath our house. So we grabbed what we could at the moment, and yeah, we got out.
So now we're looking at this video that your son took, and I know you were right there, Paul. And tell us what's happening in these pictures.
Oh, yeah, it just started collapsing. The front part that faced the river, the floor went. So I entered the house stupidly, and I looked down the stairs, and all I could see was river, and it was flowing. And then we saw a couch go by, and I go, well, don't need that anymore. And it just, yeah. And then a big crack.
And you got out. And then it went.
Oh, God, yeah.
You got out, and then it went. And then where did it go?
Gone. Just gone.
You watched your house float away?
It went under. The river just took it under and gone. Within seconds.
I was just going to say, watching the video my son took, all our stuff that we've gathered in 20 odd years, some of our animals were in that house. It's all gone. But we're not the only ones. There's so many people out there that are in worse shape as us. But my son went down to the property. He got down there, and there's absolutely nothing left. I mean, the power of the river took our barn. Like, it's gone. Everything's gone except for a little small piece of a workshop. Our house foundation is gone, and yeah, it's terrible. I feel so strong for those poor people out there as well that have lost everything.
Just a horrible situation for Paul and Pam Velt in Merritt, BC, and so many stories just like that. Okay, we are standing by to take you live to Victoria. BC Premier John Horgan, as well as the province's public safety and transport ministers, will hold a news conference on the flooding situation. It is scheduled to start at 12:45 Pacific time. You can watch that live right here on CBC News Network and CBC Television in British Columbia.
More than 200 Chilliwack residents, operations staff, and Chilliwack firefighters showed up to protect that piece of infrastructure. Together, they built a 25-meter long sandbag wall to protect.
That is the mayor of Chilliwack, BC, praising residents and city workers for helping to protect the Barrowtown pump station. It sits between Chilliwack and Abbotsford. The station is working furiously to pump water from the low-lying flooded Sumas Prairie. The mayor says the neighborhood of Chilliwack that's near the Barrowtown pumping station is under an evacuation order. He said 90% of residents in the area have left their homes. Many Canadians in British Columbia have been displaced from their homes through evacuations or due to road closures and mudslides, but some are trying to make their way back to Canada through the U.S. CBC's own Lisa Johnson has been driving through the United States since Monday to try to make it back to her family in Nelson, BC. She joins us now from Interstate 90 near Moses Lake in Washington State. So, Lisa, what's it been like to try to get back to Canada?
Well, first, I just need to say that my heart is going out to all those people in Merritt and Princeton and the Fraser Valley who are much more affected than I am. But I am on day 3 of trying to get home to my kids. I was in Vancouver for what was supposed to be a short and fun little trip. I was heading back Monday and woke up Monday to see that there wasn't just the mudslide I'd heard about the night before, but every route but one to my home and my family were cut off by the mudslides and floods. I really contemplated going the most circuitous route around and almost did until a geologist online had warned me this is not over. And in fact, it wasn't. The Highway 99 was also closed by a mudslide. And I believe that's the one that at least one person has died in. So I sat tight, I counted my blessings, and then Tuesday decided, seeing the damage on the Coquihalla, seeing Highway 1 completely inundated and the floodwater still rising, it seemed like the only way was to cross the border that I hadn't crossed since the pandemic had started and test my luck on getting around and then back up into Canada, which of course with the COVID restrictions wasn't so clear cut.
No kidding. Lisa, it's Anita here in Vancouver. I want to know, as someone who covers climate change, what are some of the thoughts or observations that are going through your mind as you're navigating this long route back home?
Well, you know, and this is not our first unprecedented climate catastrophe in British Columbia this year. There was the heat dome, all of these things we've been hearing about. And the word that keeps coming to my mind is the infrastructure and what it was built for and what it's facing now. I mean, as a journalist, that's not often the sexiest topic to cover. But I was walking across a bridge in North Vancouver on Monday, just walking a dog, watching the river rise, turn brown. There were logs rocketing past people's homes. Their basements were flooding. And I kind of had a little panic attack on the bridge saying, okay, dog, stop sniffing. We got to get off this. It wasn't built for what it's facing now. Now, that bridge was fine, but obviously many of these other highways that seemed fairly new, fairly strong, have not lasted. And, you know, the mind boggles on how long it'll take to fix those, but also to what standards they would need to be rebuilt given our uncertain but certainly worse climate future.
I mean, Lisa, that's really the question going forward, right? I mean, it's just like you see these wastewater treatment plants fail. You see a pumping station in Abbotsford that can barely keep up. You see these landslides that have trapped 275 people on Highway 7 who had to be helicoptered out of there. I mean, this is really, if this isn't the seriousness of climate change up close and personal in people's faces, I don't know what is. So what do you make of just what we've been witnessing?
Well, you know, what do we know globally? We're at 1.1 degrees warming on average since pre-industrial levels. And you just heard in the COP26 talks that the efforts to keep it to 1.5, to keep it to, well, the pledges so far are not making that. And that's just the pledges and not even the actions that countries are taking. And so, you know, it really underscores the seriousness. Our job is communicators to talk about what Canadians are going through and the decisions that our governments face, and then you know, what we'll all be facing sort of on the ground and in our lives. And then just quickly, Lisa, how are your kids doing? When do you expect to get back to Canada? My kids are safe and fine. They are grumpy, and my 7-year-old turns 8 on Saturday, so that has been my hard deadline. But I really am hoping I am home by dinner. You know, the PCR test, as I understand it, has been waived for Canadians in my situation trying to go around the mudslides and floods to get back into Canada. I also have a negative COVID test, a passport, and vaccination, so I feel like I have all the tools. And I'll be heading for the border, you know, maybe by dinner, maybe by bedtime. My fingers are crossed. And like I said, my situation is small compared to what everyone else is going through. I hope everyone gets home as safe as they can. All right. And you too, Lisa.
Lisa. Thank you. Lisa Johnson is a CBC journalist. She joined us from Moses Lake, Washington, on her way back to her family in the West Kootenays of BC.
More than 36 firefighters in Abbotsford, BC are battling a raging fire at an RV dealership. Residents nearby, of course, are worried as black smoke fills the sky. There's also concern the fire may reach nearby hydro lines. We have the CBC's Natasha Fatah working on this story and flooding in other parts of the province. Natasha, let's start with that situation in Abbotsford. What's the latest there?
Absolutely, Anita. That's a story we're watching closely because as if the flooding isn't bad enough, now you've got this additional danger of this fire at an RV parking location. So there's several different RVs there, and at least we understand possibly up to 100 of them on fire. How that fire started, we still don't know, but it happened overnight. It's still going on. It could bring down the power lines, and add to that there is a real concern of a propane facility that is not too far away. So all of that needs to be managed, and the smoke that is coming in towards the community is toxic. So they're really having to manage quite a bit in Abbotsford. You still have the ongoing concern about the water pump that is moving. There are 4 pumps that are still working at full capacity. But that facility was not built for that. So you've got people sandbagging around there all overnight. The mayor says that community members, everyone from professionals to children, coming there, trying to make sure that the community remains safe without endangering themselves, to make sure that the pump stays functional. Updates on both the fire and the pump and what kind of relief might be coming, we hope to get very soon from Premier Horgan. But in Abbotsford, it's been quite difficult. And remember that not everyone has necessarily been accounted for or evacuated yet from their homes. They're still in the process of getting people out of their homes at this stage, Anita.
Yeah, and I'm continuing to get updates from friends and family out in Abbotsford, and somebody just told me that farmers are now really trying to get back into their farms to get their equipment running up again so that they can start milking those cows and feeding them water, because at this point, the concern is for those animals who haven't been able to get out, and they've essentially been abandoned. So farmers are returning now there. Let's turn to Chilliwack, where search and rescue efforts continue. What's the update there?
So there are still 2 people that are unaccounted for, at least, or in and around the Chilliwack area, and 5 to 6 vehicles that could have been washed away by the landslides that we saw earlier in the week. So remember that Chilliwack, of course, is the region where the body of that one individual who lost her life was recovered by the RCMP. That's what made this from a devastating story to a deadly one. And so the fear is that perhaps those 2 individuals that are still missing might not have survived. That's going to be the focus and continues to be for the rescue operators who are working on the ground. The mayor gave us an update on that a short while ago, saying that they're focusing all their efforts on that they're trying to get people there, but searching and trying to have a rescue operation in the middle of that slide is in and of itself quite dangerous. So you're trying to save one person, but you're also trying to protect the rescue operators. There's so many things that need to be managed and watched for, so much uncertainty. And again, Anita, the great hope is that we might get a bit more certainty hearing from the Premier in just a few moments.
Absolutely. That is supposed to start. It was supposed to start about a few minutes ago. We are waiting for the Premier of British Columbia to speak. The CBC's Natasha Fatah in Toronto. Thanks, Natasha.
Thank you.
And as we've seen, the BC floods have made it impossible for CN and CP to run trains from Kamloops to Vancouver. That's having a serious impact on the delivery of goods to consumers and businesses. The supply chain was already hobbled, as you know, by the pandemic. Jeannie Lee joins us now with the growing impact. So first of all, what's the latest with those critical railways, Jeannie?
Well, Andrew, the latest is that both CN and CP are assessing what they can, fixing what they can, and dealing with risky circumstances, even dangerous circumstances, while doing so. So in this past hour, here's what both of them had to tell CBC when we asked them what is the latest with those repairs. From CP, which has had to stop all trains between Spence's Bridge and Falls Creek, CP has deployed crews and equipment to the region, and CP engineering teams are working to repair the damaged rail corridor as quickly as possible while safe to do so. And CP also describing the damage as multiple train outages. And from Canadian National, CN, crews continue to perform critical repair work following the mudslides and washouts that interrupted the movement of railway traffic through southern BC, working as quickly as they safely can. So emphasizing the safety aspect of this, of course, a big challenge. Also noting that the critical arteries that we're talking about here, they remain clogged. Northbound and eastbound traffic from Vancouver and from Kamloops down to Vancouver. And aside from all this, 4 major highways we know were shut down. That severs the link from BC's Lower Mainland to points north and east. And that kind of news basically will trigger people's survival worries, instincts, and that's why we're seeing some scenes like what we're about to show you. Grocery lineups, we haven't seen this kind of thing, that kind of worry since early on in the pandemic, the sense that when people see visuals like this, they really don't know how long this will last. People go into a buy now, assess the actual need to do so later mode, because nobody wants to be caught short of food and other essentials, especially when there's no sense about when roads might open up again, when those railways will be back up and running. And then there's the Port of Vancouver. Like many global ports around the world, we know it has been clogged up already with containers waiting to be loaded and unloaded, waiting for trucks and trains to carry those goods to store shelves and to businesses so everyone can operate and everybody can eat and just try to be as normal as possible.
Sorry to interrupt, Jeannie. We're going to take you now to John Horgan, the Premier of British Columbia. Let's listen.
Minister Fleming and Minister Popham. We are also joined on Zoom today by our CMPE Division Assistant Commissioner Eric Stubbs and Janelle State, Modi South Coast. Go ahead, Premier.
Great, thank you very much. And as you know, we are here assembled on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nation. The last few days have been incredibly difficult for British Columbians as we've experienced yet another natural disaster. Heavy rains, strong winds, flooding have devastated entire communities of our province. Thousands of people have been forced from their homes under evacuation orders, and many others were left stranded between road closures and mudslides. Yesterday, the RCMP confirmed the mudslides have claimed at least 1 life. That's devastating news for a family. It's devastating news for all British Columbians, but sadly, we expect to confirm even more fatalities in the coming days. Yesterday, I spoke to Prime Minister Trudeau. He offered to provide assistance where needed to help us respond to the immediate disaster, as well as working with communities to rebuild going forward. The province has now formally requested that deployment of federal resources, including the armed forces, to assist with evacuations, managing of supply chains and resupply chains, security in inundated areas, as well as restoration of safe drinking water and other logistics assistance. I'd also want to thank the governments of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, who were immediate in their offer of assistance to help in any way they can. Minister Popham will talk about a practical example that is going to serve us very, very well in the short term when she has her opportunity to speak. Multiple highways remain closed throughout BC. We're working diligently to assess the damage and make sure that we can get those supply roads back in shape as quickly as possible. But the conditions are severe, and it's essential that we work on these corridors in a way that makes safety our highest priority. And this means essential and emergency access will be limited in the days ahead. Already strained supply lines are at risk of greater disruption. Therefore, as of noon today, the Government of BC is declaring a state of emergency. The order will preserve basic access to services and supplies for communities across the province. We will bring in travel restrictions and ensure that transportation of essential goods and medical and emergency services are able to reach the communities that need them. Please do not hoard items. What you need, your neighbors need as well. We are confident that we can restore our supply chains in a quick and orderly manner, provided we all act as we have been acting over the past 2 years. Responding to challenges like this in a collaborative, cooperative way to make sure that everyone can come through this in one piece. These are very challenging times. I don't need to say that I've been at this dais over the past 2 years talking about the challenges we've faced. Unprecedented challenges with public health, wildfires, heat domes, and now debilitating floods that we have never seen before. I spoke last evening with Mayor Linda Brown and her team in Merritt, and over the past 6 months, we had drought conditions in Merritt where the river was at its lowest point in living memory, where we had people evacuated because of wildfires raging in temperatures that were unprecedented. And now we have the entire community underwater, safe water and waste treatment not accessible to citizens. Despite that, the resilient people of Merritt, who have been evacuated not once but twice in the past number of weeks, stand ready to work together and cooperate with their neighbors and communities right around the region to get through this. The decisions we've made today have formed a working group of cabinet that consists of myself as the chair, Deputy Premier Mike Farnworth as the vice chair, Minister Popham, Minister Fleming, Minister Rankin, Minister Osborne, as well as Minister Robinson and Minister Ma, to ensure that we have expertise at the table on a daily basis. But this is an across-government response. Everyone will be pulling together. There's not a person that hasn't been affected or will not be affected by the events of this past weekend. We need to, as British Columbians, as we have done through the pandemic, as we did through wildfires in 2017 and 2018 and again this year, at almost every turn when we've hit crisis, British Columbians have rallied. They've rallied because of their resilience. And for those who understand and recognize that these events are increasing in regularity because of the effects of human-caused climate change, there is hope in terms of the roadmap to 2030 that we've developed here in British Columbia and the leadership that Canada is showing on the international stage to bring the other 7 billion souls on this planet to the position where we can understand that we need to act now to make the changes in our community and in our economy that will protect us from these types of events in the future. I'm now happy to pass the podium over to Minister Farnworth, who will walk through the events of the day, and then on to other ministers to update you on the circumstances in their various files.
Thank you, Premier, and good afternoon, everyone. And I'm honored to be here on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people and the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. As the Premier announced, today we are declaring a provincial state of emergency based on advice that I've received from Emergency Management BC and the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. While the province has been able to take all necessary steps to respond to the emergency to this point, the next steps in this response may necessitate extraordinary measures only available through this declaration under the Emergency Program Act. This province-wide declaration will help us with the challenges ahead as we recover from the utter devastation that we are seeing. As you know, multiple highways remain closed throughout BC, causing disruptions to travel. And I encourage everyone not to travel unless it is essential. This is not the time for travel for leisure purposes. Our transportation infrastructure is crippled, and we need to ensure that it comes back online as quickly as possible, and we are prioritizing essential access. As the Premier stated, this is a catastrophic event, and we need to work to get through it together. We've been doing that through the COVID pandemic. We've been doing that through other emergencies in this province, and we're going to have to do it again. It's challenging, but I know all of us as British Columbians are up for that challenge. Above all, we need to ensure that everyone has access to food, water, and essential goods. We know people are concerned. We're aware as government, and industry is aware. We need to remain calm There are many areas where there are not disruptions and goods are able to flow. Getting our roadways and rail back up and in operation is our #1 priority, and the Ministry of Transportation will provide whatever resources are necessary to make that happen. Emergency Management BC and our government as a whole will work to provide anything else that is needed. We fully recognize how important it is to reopen road connections from the Lower Mainland to the interior to get those supply chains moving. This declaration will allow us to implement any provincial emergency measures and allow access to all assets that may be necessary to prevent, respond, or to alleviate the effects of an emergency. This may include measures to prohibit non-essential travel, to prevent hoarding, to prevent price gouging, similar to what we had to do during the COVID-19 emergency. This may also include accessing any infrastructure at the province's disposal. In short, we will be doing everything possible. Also, as many of you know, late last night, the City of Abbotsford issued a warning to any remaining residents in an evacuated area in Sumas Prairie due to a potential failure of the pump station. People have been evacuating, but once again, I just want to make it clear, if anyone remains in this area, you need to leave immediately. I've been in contact with Bill Blair, my federal counterpart, the Federal Minister of Emergency Preparedness, to access federal assistance in this incident and the flooding situation in general. This includes Canadian Armed Forces, ground and air support. I'd also like to thank all first responders, local governments, and volunteers who have been working around the clock responding to the flooding and helping people in need. I'll now pass it over to Minister Fleming for a further update.
Thank you and good afternoon. I want to provide this update from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure about how we are doing work to continue to reopen our roadways. I would first like to extend my sincere thanks to so many people who are doing incredible heavy lifting out there right across our province. Thousands of people are stepping up in extremely challenging conditions. People are helping strangers who have been stranded. They're providing food and shelter. Search and rescue volunteers are out there battling fatigue and continuing to do their job to keep people safe. Provincial staff from both the Emergency Management BC, the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, and our road maintenance contractors are doing their jobs. Federal and local government partners, fire departments, and volunteers are putting in amazing efforts to help people and to restore connectivity in our road networks. There are countless others who will be mentioned in the days ahead who have done heroic things. As we move forward on reestablishing our transportation corridors, the outpouring of help and support has been nothing short of inspirational. Our ministry yesterday was able to get a first-hand look at the impacts of the worst weather storm in a century and the impacts it's had on our infrastructure. And our staff are now putting together specific repair plans for those sites that have sustained significant damage. Our immediate priority, as I mentioned yesterday, is to reestablish connections from the Lower Mainland to the interior and the north parts of the province. We know how vitally important it is to open routes and to have supply chains moving. That is our focus. We are working on this focus with multiple partners. And again, people and companies are really stepping up. CN Rail has been exceptionally helpful, moving people and goods by air, by helicopter, while work continues to open their rail lines. BC Ferries here on the coast is adding sailings for cargo out of Duke Point to Schwartz Bay to connect the South Island with the Mid and North Island, as well as extra sailings on the Mill Bay, Brentwood Bay route, while work continues to fully open the Malahat Highway 1. The BC Trucking Association has been hugely supportive of our efforts to find alternate routes, as well as working with the province and the federal government, who are helping to facilitate goods movement through the United States that would otherwise be impacted by events in the Lower Mainland. Work is progressing to open highway routes along Highway 7 west of Agassiz. Emergency vehicle access was established yesterday, as I updated people. And I'm pleased to announce that as a couple of hours ago, that has opened up to single lane alternating traffic. But again, for essential travel only. This is for people who have urgent needs. People who need to move livestock, people who need to move additional pump equipment to the Sumas Prairie area and the Barrowtown pump station. Last night, for example, our road maintenance contractor, Emil Anderson, delivered 40,000 sandbags to the Barrowtown pump station. Access via Highway 7 was critical to accomplishing this, and it speaks to the importance of keeping these roads for essential movement only. There was some unnecessary congestion on Highway 7 last night that impeded some of the efforts, but we got through it and people were cooperative. But that is why I ask the public to please still avoid that area if your travel is not absolutely essential. On the other side of Agassiz, towards Hope on Highway 7, we should have emergency vehicle access established later today, and we will notify the media and the public as we progress. Again, I want to stress how important it is that the general public not try to access that route for the time being, as you will only impede the safety of others with urgent needs. We're working closely with Emergency Management BC to prioritize people getting out of Hope who've been stranded there, but please, again, for the general public, stay away from those areas on Highway 7. In fact, as a general rule, if you're safe and secure where you are, we ask you keep any travel in impacted areas in your region to only that which is absolutely essential. Other highway networks for me to update today. Progress is being made on clearing and repairing some of the other routes, including Highway 3, Highway 99, as well as Highway 1, the Malahat on Vancouver Island. Highway 3, by the end of the weekends, will be open to emergency access, and we continue to work to restore full traffic on that route. Highway 99 work began this morning. The pavement appears to be intact on that route after we have cleared debris and slide material. We should have an update on the projected opening of Highway 99 by the end of today. Highway 1, as I mentioned, the Malahat here, the Island Highway, continued work is happening. The overnight closures last night were successful. Single lane alternating traffic is open in daylight hours, and for the next 5 and if necessary 6 evenings, there will be closures at night when we will advise the public of that. This is a huge job, but collectively we're up to the challenge, and we will get things opened up again just as soon as we possibly can. For my ministry, Janelle State will provide a detailed update on roadwork status across the province, as she has been doing. But I want to say in closing, just to reiterate the points that the Premier and Minister Farnworth have made, we're doing everything we can that is possible to get transportation links open and get people and goods moving. No resources will be spared. The federal government is highly engaged, and I want to thank Minister Alghabra again for the assistance he is providing. And they are ready to provide support and are providing support. And again, I want to thank all the emergency crews who have worked day and night since the weekend, tirelessly to keep people safe, and for those in the public who have stepped up to help each other in this incredibly difficult time. And I will now pass things over to Minister Popham.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is a very difficult time for agriculture in BC and our producers, especially in the Fraser Valley. My heart goes out to everyone affected by the flooding right now, and we're working hard to make contact with every association that we can. Over the last 2 days, we've made over 300 contacts with associations, with local government associations, with farmers directly, and this is being done through ministry support. We have lists of contacts that we use during emergencies. We've also been using social media to ask people to contact us if anybody has fallen through the cracks. I feel confident that we've covered off most commodity groups, and people understand that we're there with them. Our commitment in the ministry is to make sure that we are with them through this continuing emergency state, and that we'll be with them in recovery. There are some difficult issues that we're dealing with around animal welfare. There's probably hundreds of farms that have been affected by flooding. Some are still underwater, some are on dry locations, and we have thousands of animals that have perished. We have many, many more that are in difficult situations, and we're seeing an animal welfare issue develop. They need attention, and so with my colleagues, we're developing routes so that veterinarians can access farms, and get to the animals as soon as possible. There will have to be euthanizations that happen. But there are also animals who have survived that are going to be in critical need for food in the next 24 hours. We knew we had a window of about 3 to 4 days in our poultry sector, in our dairy sector, but those stores are running out now. And some of the food that has been stored is underwater itself. So we've made contact with feed mills. We've made contacts with our colleagues across the nation to try and access food that's going to be needed to keep these animals healthy. I can tell you that the contacts that I've made over the years, we exchange cell phone numbers. And so over the last 2 days, I've been able to have FaceTime discussions with farmers, and some of them are in their barns, and some of their barns are flooded, and you can see the animals that are deceased, and it's heartbreaking. This is an especially difficult time for our livestock producers. We will make sure that disaster relief funds are available for farmers and that we're supporting them in every step of the way. Another unfortunate situation is that our agricultural animal and health lab has been flooded in the Fraser Valley. And that's an important piece of infrastructure that we need to do disease testing, but it also tests for milk in our milk supply. So we are very grateful that Alberta and Saskatchewan have reached out to us and offered their lab services. That's going to make a big difference as we try and get back on our feet. The minister, the federal minister of agriculture, Minister Bibeau, has reached out and dedicated her support. I've also heard directly from the Minister of Ontario, who has also lent her support as well. And so this is early days in this disaster for agriculture. Things are still unfolding, but myself, along with my colleagues and the Premier, were committed to making sure that agriculture is supported as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues, and with that, we'll take questions from the floor, and we do have technical experts online that may well be better suited than any of us to answer questions that you may have, but we're here to give you the best information we can at this time. So over to you, Lindsay.
Thank you, Premier. As a reminder to everybody on the phone line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You're limited to 1 question and 1 follow-up. We will start with phone questions today and go to the room at the end. First question today is from Justine Hunter, Globe and Mail. Justine, are you there? Okay, we'll come back to Justine. Lisa Cordasco, Vancouver Sun.
Thank you. Premier, over the weekend, or I should say on Monday, MLA Bruce Banman said that he raised concerns about the Nooksack River on Monday during an emergency briefing, and he said that officials looked at him blankly, and there wasn't any reaction from him on that. Now, previous to this, over the weekend, you met virtually with your Washington State counterpart. Were you briefed at all about the measures they were already taking, like sandbagging the Nooksack River on their side? And what did you do with that information?
Well, you don't have accurate information, Lisa. I did not meet with Governor Inslee. I participated in a Cascadia Corridor forum with him yesterday, and we had a brief discussion before the conference began about the situation above and below the border, but I had no briefing on the Nooksack River, and I didn't get the name of the individual you referred to. But I can assure you that the Forest, Lands, and Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development regularly monitors not just rivers in British Columbia, but in adjacent jurisdictions to ensure that we have the most accurate information available. And I can say very confidently that those professional government employees take this work very seriously, and we depend on that good work, not just domestically, but in other jurisdictions, to plan and prepare as best we can. That's why alerts go out. And again, I don't know the individual. I didn't hear the name, and I had no briefings over the weekend on any rivers in the United States.
Do you have a follow-up, Lisa?
Yes, thank you. is it acceptable that the province has relied on Drive BC, Environment Canada, and local areas to inform local people about what's happening? And why did the province not step in and use the Alert Ready system to inform all of us in BC, which may have made some people think twice about traveling over the weekend and on Monday?
And thank you for that question. The Alert Ready system is something that is a tool. It is not a silver bullet. It is intended to be able to do very much localized, focused alerts. In terms of alerts that were taking place, Drive BC is the go-to site for drivers traveling around the province. Flood and stream warnings are updated on a regular basis. And as our flood advisories communicated to local governments who are able to take that information, do the work that they need to do. Crews are out on the weekend, both at the local level and in terms of ministry and transportation and highways. And so they were doing what they're supposed to do. The reality is that this weather event was unprecedented. Even though we were expecting heavy rainfall, significant rainfall, it was beyond what any of us expected. And even the experts were just completely surprised by it. That also being said, when it comes to the Alert Ready system, it's also done on the advice of affected communities. And we will always take that advice in terms of when and how to use it.
Next question is from Belle Puri, CBC.
So a little bit on what Lisa was touching on, but kind of looking ahead and what's happening right now, what kind of cooperation, if any, is coming from the United States to deal with the Sumas flooding?
Well, again, I did have a conversation with Governor Inslee yesterday about the situation above and below the border. We have a very positive working relationship at the political level as well as at the administrative level. And I'm confident that information is being exchanged and best practices are in place. I'll also add, I spoke with Mayor Linda Brown from Merritt and her chief administrative officer, and the highest measurement, and I'll get the units of measurement incorrect, but the numbers speak for themselves. The highest recorded measurement of a unit going through Merritt was 145. And on Sunday evening, it was 500, not twice, but 3 times what was the historic high. Unprecedented, as was the impact of heat in the summer. These are extraordinary events not measured before, not contemplated before in putting in place where people will live, where roads are constructed, a whole host of initiatives about adaptation to the world that we now live in with respect to climate change will flow not just from the events of this past year, but those that we can now better predict based on these extraordinary once in a 500-year event. That will help us better prepare for the future, but there was nothing that could have been done by a 3 times the historic high volume of water traveling through Merritt in one day. We had more rain in 2 days than we normally get in an entire November. And we all know that we live in a rainforest. We get wet in November, but nothing remotely resembling this. And I think all British Columbians fully understand that now we have to better prepare for events like this, but we couldn't have even imagined it 6 months ago.
Follow up, Belle?
Yes, please. So we just heard the Agriculture Minister talk about the dire situation with animals, and some are trapped and some have died. What warnings are being issued about the floodwater itself, especially when people are probably just, desperate to try to rescue some of their things?
I think my colleague, Minister Farnworth, will be able to answer that from his perspective, but from an agriculture perspective, I know that many people have seen the rescue attempts that have been attempted in the Fraser Valley. Farmers are desperate to move their animals. We've seen them trying to move them in boats. We've seen them towing them through the river. And so I think that we're not encouraging that, but we understand why that happens, because farmers are desperately trying to find a safe, dry spot, high spot for their animals. I think most of that has already happened. The animals that are getting moved through those water flows have been able to make it to a safe spot, but to tell you the truth, that they're not in good shape by the time they get there. And so I can also tell you that many farmers attempted to move animals and then had to walk away because the roads were disappearing beneath them. And so I think Minister Farnworth might be able to address the floodwaters better, but that's the agricultural perspective.
Thank you for that question. So in terms of the floodwaters themselves, one of the things that happens during situations like this is that certain areas of water systems get shut down. So for example, one of the reasons why the evacuation order in Merritt went from the initial 2,000 households to the entire town was because of the potential compromising of the sewage and water treatment plant. So that had to be shut down, which meant not being able to access water, of course, which then meant you have to evacuate the whole town. In the agricultural areas, likewise, when it comes to water systems that are near the manure and sewage things, that gets shut down. And then so that you're protecting the integrity of the rest of the water system. We work very closely with local communities on this, as well as any water issues. We will be working with public health.
Next question is from Lisa Yuzda, City News.
Hi there, ministers and premier. Regarding this conversation about the use of the alert system and how people can know what's happening and what is possible, and I think you made clear that it's something that is asked for by locals and doesn't work quite the way I think many people think it does. But considering this is, the third unprecedented event, do we need to look at, or what can be looked at of changing how we approach these kinds of events when they're coming? Premier, you were saying it's wet. We get very wet here, but do we need to look at the fact that these things are not what they used to be, and does there need to be a look at changing these alerts, perhaps coming earlier, just in case?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. In terms of alerts, many communities have alerting systems in place. And I know that there is a lot of focus on the Alert Ready system. It has a place. And it is, I said, it is one tool. We've indicated that we want to have a system in place next year that we will start first in the central interior. But we have to make sure that it works in compatibility with existing systems that are in place, that you're not overlapping, and that you're avoiding duplication. And we also have to recognize that many areas do not have, so for example, if you're on the Coquihalla Highway at 120K an hour, or where there's no cell coverage, an alert ready system's is not going to be of assistance. Like last night in Abbotsford, for example, the community initially looked at wanting to use the alert ready. But when it became apparent that in the evacuation order, what you're going to be doing is in fact broadcasting to a larger area, and the potential for panic and putting strain on emergency resources, which are working overtime and round the clock to deal with a situation. And they determined that no, this is not the appropriate point to use this, that what they were doing was going door to door, that was the most effective way. That's how these decisions need to be made, by the experts on the ground, not by experts on Twitter, but the experts on the ground dealing with that local situation, understanding the local conditions. And I can tell you, as Solicitor General, I will always take their experience, their expertise, that local knowledge, when it comes when and how to deploy an alert, and when and how to deploy resources.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, and more broadly, with maybe a warning that people maybe shouldn't have been driving with that kind of rain coming. With these events turning unprecedented, presumably because of climate change, is it time for those more broad-based warnings to be like, we don't know what this is that's coming exactly, and maybe people need to err on the side of caution. And also, just a little side note, I'm wondering if you can talk about with the hoarding, if you're going to be asking people to only, or putting in orders that people can only take certain amounts of eggs or milk or that types of goods from stores.
And thank you for the question. Obviously, whenever we have an event like this, a situation like this, we learn lessons from that, and we undoubtedly will. What we have in place right now is a system of alerts involving Drive BC, flood warnings to local communities. We have highway signs in place, all of those things. If we need to do more, we most certainly will do more. You know, that's one of the important things in terms of dealing with these kinds of situations. It's also one of the reasons why we are currently undergoing that significant rewrite of the Emergency Program Act to take into account climate change, to put in place the latest approaches and ways of dealing with disasters. Being the first province in this country besides the federal government to sign up to the Sendai framework, which is how to approach disasters. So it's about adaptation, it's about mitigation, it's about response and recovery, all of those things together. So we are very much you know, going to be learning the lessons from this and putting in new measures and new approaches, obviously.
Colton Davies, Radio NL.
Hi, can you hear me?
Just hang on, Colton. Go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about details on the travel restrictions and when those will be brought in. For the details, I'm assuming this would impact travel between the southern interior and lower mainland. And would there be roadblocks for the few highways that will be open in the weeks ahead, like for the Hope Princeton or even the Duffy Lake Road, which is obviously less used?
Thank you. Yes, and that's exactly what you saw on Highway 7 last night. The RCMP were there informing people that were seeking to commute along the reopened Highway 7 west of Agassiz that it was for essential movement only, and of course that's how we got things like pumping equipment to the Barrowtown station, how we got our contractors and others who lent an effort overnight to reinforce the pumping station. So when we give an update that will connect Hope to the interior via Route 3, because that's our focus right now. We will make it clear that it will likely be restricted traffic. We'll want to get trucks queued up to where they need to be, and we'll want emergency vehicles to have access. And quite frankly, it's about getting heavy equipment in there first, because we can punch a hole through, but then we've got to clear up a lot of debris and get the highway to a much higher state of functionality so that we can open more than just one lane. And so that's the approach we took on Highway 1 on Vancouver Island, and that's the approach we'll take on Highway 3.
Follow-up, Colton?
Yeah, just to build on that, when the Hope Princeton does reopen, is the province concerned that, you know, even if it's fully open, it's mostly an undivided rural highway with one lane each way? Would it be able to handle the capacity of even just essential traffic, of truck traffic and other kinds of movements? And I'm also curious what the province might be able to say about the timelines for reopening for CP and CN Rail, if they have any indications that those rail lines could reopen in the Fraser Canyon even sooner than when Highway 1 might reopen through that corridor too.
Yeah. So when we reopen Highway 3 and other highways like the 99, there will be, it will be to drive to conditions, and conditions will in some cases be single alternating traffic, and there will be congestion, there will be truck corridor traffic, so the speed limits and the driving conditions will be taken into account into how to use those routes until a higher degree of functionality is restored. So as we get more capacity, we will change the instructions about how to drive highway networks that we reopen. We will provide an update with our federal colleagues from Transport Canada. There's been a high degree of mobilization with CN and CP Rail to repair sections of track that were underwater and infrastructure that is damaged. I don't have that update currently, but that's the focus of my discussions with Minister Alghabra, and the companies will likely provide an update, I think, with the federal government and ourselves. So we'll, what I can say is that there is reports of good progress, so a more fulsome update is pending.
Next question is from Richard Zisman, Global News.
Premier, around the powers of the state of emergency, what specifically can the province do to stop people from hoarding? We're seeing pictures, as you are well aware, not just in the communities that are cut off, but in many other communities that are not cut off. So what specifically can be done in that regard? And in terms of the powers of the state of emergency, what can be done in terms of travel? And does that include those who are right now stuck in an area like Hope and not able to get home? Are they part of the priority group?
Well, certainly our priority is to get people back to where they need to be. Where they live is the best place to be. We do know, based on our experience with state of emergency and the COVID pandemic in the early days, and as well at those difficult times when there were concerns about supply chains, that we can take actions to protect and preserve the civility that we expect from our neighbors and our colleagues. And I'm confident that Minister Farnworth can give you more details on the tools that he has at his disposal as the Solicitor General, as well as the Minister responsible for the Emergency Preparedness Act. But for me, this is about British Columbians doing what we've been doing over the past almost 2 years, of respecting each other and recognizing that we are living through an extraordinary historic time with respect to the pandemic, and now with respect to an inundation that is unprecedented in our history. And I think that most people, I'm confident that the vast majority of British Columbians are going to bear down, and we're going to work through this. The four of us and the cabinet who met today to deliberate and look at the information are people doing the jobs that we were elected to do. But we're doing that on behalf of the thousands of people that Rob talked about that are standing at the ready. The building trades unions, the Road Builders Association, all saying, let's go. When do we start? We're putting in place measures to ensure that we can accelerate contracts and tenders so we can get the work done in a way and a manner that British Columbians would expect. But those are decisions that we make to allow the creativity and the power of the great innovative people of British Columbia to do this work. So I'm very confident that the people who built British Columbia will be able to rebuild it as quickly as is safe to do so. With respect to the hoarding, again, I'm saying people, do the right thing. Listen to what your mom told you when you were little. Do unto others as you would have do unto you. Respect the fact that you do not need 48 eggs. A dozen will do, and leave the rest for somebody else.
Go ahead, Richard.
I'm trying to get an understanding. We have crews in the Pemberton area that have gone over the site in which we've seen one confirmed fatality, and Premier, as you mentioned, there are potentially more. What they see from the air is that crews are not able at this point to access. I don't know if you have the technical information on this or if the RCMP can weigh in, but I'm just trying to understand what work is being done on the ground to help provide some certainty to these families and also to better understand the work that's being done. And also, Premier, if you can at the end, I've been asked to get you to comment as well on the federal government changing rules around PCR testing at the border. I know it's a separate issue, but I'm hoping at the end you can also speak to that change as well.
Well, why don't I respond to that first, Richard, and then allow Rob and Mike to talk about the work being done on the road, because they're the responsible for those activities, and I know Minister Farnworth and the RCMP are working intently on that. I'm grateful. We had a First Minister's meeting yesterday to talk about COVID, as we have been for what seems like an interminable period of time, but important decisions were made by the federal government with respect to our border crossings with the United States. We are very happy to hear that the PCR testing rules that were in place for short visits will no longer apply for those who want to travel to the United States for a day or two. I raised this issue through interventions by people here in British Columbia some weeks ago, and I'm grateful that the federal government has responded. There's still a host of challenges when it comes to COVID-19. I don't want people to think that we can't manage these multiple challenges, because of course we have to, that's our job. But the level of cooperation that we've seen across the country when it comes to COVID, the responsiveness of the federal government to requests from provinces, and we're diverse, as everyone knows who's traveled across this country. The issues in Saskatchewan are not the issues in New Brunswick, nor northern British Columbia is quite distinct from southern Ontario. But we have all been coming together to address these issues collectively as Canadians. And that has borne significant fruit on COVID. And as Lana has testified today, those relationships have allowed us to rapidly put in place systems that will protect the health of British Columbians with respect to the agriculture crisis that we're now facing, because we were able to work collaboratively in the past. Many will know that I've had differences of opinion with Alberta governments on a number of issues, but on the very, very basic elements of how do we work together, Albertans, people from Ontario, Quebecers, British Columbians, all speak with one voice, that we need to hang together through these difficult times and make decisions that are in the best interest of all British Columbians. To have Ottawa respond to our overtures, and those from Yukon Territory, quite frankly, to remove the testing requirements for those who have been double vaccinated was a good move. It's good public policy, and it was done at our request, and I'm grateful to the federal government for doing that work. And I'll now ask Mike to talk about the challenging issues that you touched on your preliminary question, Richard.
Thank you for that question. This is obviously a very challenging and difficult situation, and a very tragic situation. The RCMP yesterday did confirm one individual, and are looking and working to determine how many other fatalities they are. I think it's appropriate that I ask Assistant Commissioner Stubbs to give more detail in terms of the work and how it's taking place and what the RCMP are doing. So I would defer to Assistant Commissioner Stubbs.
Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Minister. As the Minister mentioned, the work is very complex. Geotechnical analysis of the area is being conducted, and it has to be deemed safe in order for the emergency specialists to gain access to the search site. We're meeting every day with them to assess it, because the site does change, and that work will continue. As mentioned, we did confirm that there has been one fatality. We have not confirmed any additional fatalities. However, we are or have received what we believe to be 3 missing person reports of people that may be associated to the mudslide. There have been numerous other missing person reports, but we have deconflicted those reports to determine whether or not those people were anywhere near that area.
Thank you. Minister Fleming.
Yeah, thank you. And just to the other part of Richard's question around restoring road capacity and getting into challenged areas that have slides and debris on them. It's really inch by inch or kilometer by kilometer. For a specific update to the highway that I think you were referring to, I will turn things over to our Regional Director, Janelle State, to make some additional comments.
Go ahead, Janelle.
Thank you. So on Highway 99, south of Chilliwack, we originally thought there was 3 slide sites. There is in fact only 2 slide sites. We have cleared one of the slide sites that is discrete from the one that we're still working closely with the RCMP and search and rescue on. So at the one slide site where we had been able to clear the debris, that is where we do know that the pavement is in fact intact. Still debris to be done, but at least we can get through. At this point, our contractor continues to work closely with the RCMP, recognizing the sensitivity of the situation.
Rob Shaw, Check News.
Is anyone able to speak to the gasoline supply situation in BC right now? I know the Trans Mountain Pipeline's been closed for several days. We're seeing lineups at gas stations. Some gas stations are running out. Is there an issue with that supply? Is it an issue of getting gasoline at gas stations? Is it an issue of getting gas to British Columbia, or what is the current situation right now? Does anyone know?
What I can tell you in terms of gasoline and other supplies is that we are working very closely with distributors, with transportation companies in terms of how new routes are required if necessary. We will be monitoring and working very closely to ensure that there are fuel supplies getting to where they are needed, and that will be very much a priority in terms of the work going forward.
Follow-up, Rob?
And then just on the hoarding situation, when we saw the original kind of problems in grocery stores with COVID, there were limits put on people and what they could purchase: water, toilet paper, canned goods. Why are we not doing that right now? And would that not address some of the empty store shelves we're seeing?
I'll make a couple of comments in regard to that. That is one of the areas under the state of emergency where emergency powers could be used, for example, in terms of dealing with not just hoarding but with gouging, and we saw it was effective in terms of dealing with during the COVID situation. The reality was also this, that many stores, and we're working with the Retail Council, already in discussions with the Retail Council on supply in general, many retailers took it upon themselves to put in place limits on items once they noticed, that there was a run on certain products, or people were buying 40 rolls of toilet paper. And what it really comes down to is what the Premier talked about, doing the right thing. Recognizing that you don't need 4 dozen eggs, a dozen will do. And the Retail Council and the transportation, the trucking industry have already been really clear. There's lots of supply. Yes, we have routes that are challenged, but you know what? There's large areas of the province where those routes are not compromised, and supplies are going to get through. And in those isolated communities, there are plans. If supplies need to be brought in, we can do that. Just to remind people, because we've heard in cases in northern BC, the routes from Edmonton to Prince George to Prince Rupert are wide open, and the trucks will be going back and forth, and there will be plenty of supply. So people need to do the right thing, be patient, and the goods are going to get to where they need to get to.
I just wanted to also just add something. So during the pandemic, it wasn't that we were going to run out of food, it was that we had to figure out a different way of distributing food. And in this case, the Fraser Valley has a high population of supply managed products. In BC, we are a strong supporter of supply management. This is a national program that runs right across Canada. So British Columbia is responsible for producing like eggs, milk, chicken, our percentage of a national need. And so the magic of supply management is that when one thing goes down in one part of the country, other provinces can pick up. And so in BC, for dairy, we're part of the Western Milk Pool, and we're also part of a national scheme. And so we won't run out of food. And so I also encourage people to not be as enthusiastic when they're shopping. Thank you.
Last question, Vinder Sajjan, CTV.
Premier, just wanted to go back to your comments at the beginning, hearing that there may be more fatalities when it comes to this event, and just wondering, does that refer to just what's happening in Lillooet, or is that in other areas as well? And also, can you maybe give us for people who are out of their homes due to flooding, can you give us a sense of what type of assistance the province will be providing in the longer term?
I was referencing, as RCMP Representative Stubbs, Eric commented that there are persons missing. Searches are underway. We're hopeful for the best, but as days go by, hope diminishes, and we'll just have to see how that goes. But there are people, as we always know in these circumstances, our search and rescue people are out there braving the elements, putting themselves in harm's way to help those that they have never met before. So we're remaining hopeful, but I want British Columbians to understand the magnitude of this problem and the unprecedented nature of the tragedy. With respect to how will we respond to those who have lost their homes, flood insurance is not common. There are some instances where it's available, and not everyone's aware that it is. Some people will have applied for flood insurance in the past and been told by their insurance provider it's not available. It may well be now, but it's not known to them. Particularly when I think of the impacts in Merritt, but not exclusively, we have a daunting challenge ahead of us. We've already, of course, been working with the community of Lytton to respond to the wildfires that completely leveled that community, and many of those homes are without insurance. So we're working through those issues. But I think British Columbians need to understand that the past practices don't really seem to apply, in my mind, to these extraordinary events. So we'll be working with the Minister of Finance. The good news is we have significant fiscal capacity in British Columbia. Our economy is going along very well. The unemployment is down. We have more people working now than before the pandemic. And there'll be more to say on our fiscal situation as the Minister of Finance makes her regular statements as the year goes by. But I do know that the federal government stands ready to help, and we will need to look at new measures, new programs to help those people that have been devastated by these events. I can't give you a ballpark answer today until we have a thorough assessment of what the consequences are, who is insured, who is not. Lana, Minister Popham has already said on the agriculture disaster side, there are programs, federal and provincial, that can be accessed. But at this point in the crisis, most people, as Lana said, on the farm are doing what they can to protect those animals that are still alive and making sure that their life's work is as protected as it can be as the waters start to recede. So we'll be looking at the damage and the consequences and cost of that damage as it becomes clear. And I say to all British Columbians, we need to hang together in this circumstance. These are unprecedented times. We need to start preparing for a future that includes more regular events like this, and we fully intend to do that.
Follow-up, Binder?
Yes, I just want to be clear on the families who are now in Hope. Should they be expecting to stay there for another 4 or 5 days before they can probably head back? Yeah. And just if you can just talk also about sort of the financial impact to the economy to having these roads blocked off. Do we know already what the impact is?
Well, it's too early to say on what the consequences will be. As Minister Fleming has said, we're working as quickly as possible to, first of all, assess the damage and then put in place the programs to repair. And that will mean workarounds. Both Minister Farnworth and Minister Fleming have talked about the trucking industry, who kept us going, as we all remember now, through COVID. Our supply chains were strong because of the hard work of British Columbians, independent truckers and others who were up and traveling to get goods and bring them back to British Columbia. Our ports remain open. Hopefully the railways will be back online quickly. So I'm confident that we can withstand this, and our economy is strong, but it is early days. And perhaps I'll ask Rob to talk about those that are stranded in Hope and how quickly we can get them back home.
Thank you. Yeah, and just I would go back to our efforts right now that are ongoing to be able to get through Highway 7 and find a route to Hope. So we will prioritize emergency vehicles, get heavy equipment in there to unblock the way and to restore connectivity to Hope. So we'll be updating you as accurate and real-time information becomes available.
So
and
the
of
time
course,
we have for
updating all those who are currently stranded in Hope.
Thanks for joining us.
You have been listening to the Premier of British Columbia and other provincial officials as Premier Horgan declared a state of emergency province-wide for BC. This is a result of the catastrophic once-in-a-century flooding and landslides and mudslides that we have seen in the province. A request has been made to the federal government for Canadian Armed Forces personnel. It has been granted, and personnel will be arriving. One person confirmed dead, but the Premier there saying that expect that number to rise in the coming days. Anita Bath, host of CBC Vancouver News, is joining me to host our coverage, and the CBC's Lindsay Duncombe joins us now from Vancouver. She was listening in to that live along with us. And Lindsay, so this is a state of emergency for British Columbia. What does that allow the province to do?
Part of this is making sure that there are control over those roads so that travel restrictions can be put in place, allowing the province to say that to access access those roads once they are fully open, that only essential people moving livestock, people who need to get back, that they can triage that and make sure that people are only traveling for essential reasons. The other thing that a state of emergency could do, although there were no specifics about when these kinds of measures would be put in place, would be to restrict the kinds of goods that people could get, to prevent hoarding. We heard the Premier say over and over again, hoarding is not necessary. There was a lot of reassurance about the work that is being done to restore supply chains, even though right now we are seeing people talking about empty grocery store shelves, saying that with this work from the federal government, in addition to work with other provinces, work with other industries, food will be getting to people who need it.
And Lindsay, a huge story out of this news conference as well is about the animals. We know that thousands of them have died in Abbotsford and in other parts of the province. Many more are trapped. And the agriculture minister even getting quite emotional there, saying she's been talking to farmers and seeing images, horrible images of animals in the background suffering. What do we know about what kind of help is going to be going in to help save these animals that can be saved?
Well, they know that there's a very short window of time, because what's happening is that the animals who may have survived the floods, particularly in the Fraser Valley, Anita, they're running out of food. So even if they manage to survive, those animals need to be found and they need to be fed. So crews, once access is available, will be going in to do that. Veterinarians are going to be part of that as well. And in addition, there are likely animals suffering. This is an animal welfare issue, and some of those animals will have to be euthanized.
And Lindsay, of course, the livestock situation is serious, but we're also learning, we have some numbers in terms of the number of people who have had to flee their homes. It's close to 18,000, 6,000 properties. So this is a serious situation where we have thousands and thousands of people that are stranded, but there is some hope that the highways, that some of the highways, or at least a lane here and there, will be open. But given the state of emergency, they do not want British Columbians to be traveling for anything except for essential reasons.
You know, I think one of the biggest takeaways I had listening to that news conference as it went on, for the better part of an hour, Andrew, is just how long it will feel like there is an emergency in this province, how long travel will be restricted, how long people will be learning about exactly the kind of devastation that has unfolded.
Lindsay, thank you.
So as you heard there, BC has declared a province-wide state of emergency. Premier John Horgan says residents have been hit with catastrophic events. He's urging everyone to pull together and to stay off those roads for non-essential travel. Now, flooding and landslides have endangered lives and decimated key infrastructure here in BC. Roads are washed out, power lines are knocked out, crucial supply lines are cut off. National Defence says the Canadian Armed Forces could provide humanitarian assistance, logistical and supply chain support. Of course, that can't come fast enough for communities like Abbotsford. From the air, it appears swamped by muddy waters. You can see this here, just covered in water. Environment Canada says Abbotsford will get even more rain early next week. Fire officials there are stretched thin. More than 30 of them spent hours battling a fire at an RV dealership. Of course, that's about the last thing the community needs right now, but it appears they do have an upper hand and that toxic smoke is thinning.
And much of southern British Columbia remains under some form of a flood advisory or warning today. And as you can see, Princeton, close to the U.S. border, is under a high stream flow advisory. The city's threat level was downgraded once water began to recede. Abbotsford and Chilliwack remain under a flood watch. That means river levels are rising and could flow over their banks. Merritt is listed as a flood warning, the level of most concern. The entire city has been ordered to evacuate.
Let's take a look at Hope now, where hundreds of people have been stranded since mudslides and flooding caused major highways to close. Greg Robbins and his family have been stuck in Hope since Sunday night, like hundreds of others. They've been sleeping at an Esso gas station for the last 3 nights. Greg, walk us through how you and your family ended up sleeping there. And are you actually inside the gas station, or are you sleeping in your car at night?
So yeah, every night we are sleeping in our car, 4 of us, plus a great big huge dog in the back. And then we do go into the gas station, which is actually very nice. They've got beautiful showers and a fantastic restaurant and a little lounge. So that's a great break, but it's in our car at night.
So Greg, this is Andrew in Toronto. How are you and your family, have you been managing all of this?
Well, I think we're trying to take it in stride and stay positive, and just look at the bright side. I mean, we were lucky in that we missed some of those slides just by maybe half an hour, and I know many people are in far worse shape than we are. So I think we sort of are counting our blessings and knowing that it could be worse, and we're surrounded by good people, and I know that the kids have been really wonderful, and our dog has been extremely happy. And maybe Nicole, I don't know, you have.
The people of Hope have been so generous, and everyone is just offering their homes and food. We've actually found a home to take refuge in tonight, so thankfully it won't be a fourth night in the car because it's getting pretty cold.
No kidding. And we've heard a lot of stories in Hope of people taking others into their home and housing them for days. We also have gotten a bit of an update on the highways here. Highway 7 reopening to single lane essential traffic. But what information are you hearing in terms of road openings and your plans to get out of Hope?
Not much. That's been the challenge. The owner of the Esso and the Rickies there, it's a truck stop. He spoke with the mayor today and he gave us a bit of an update, but there's so much conflicting information and a lot of rumors flying around. We don't know how much longer we should be expecting to be here, how much more school we're gonna miss. Should we try and fly out of here? How are we gonna get our car later? We just really have no idea.
Yeah, that must be really challenging at this time, but I'm glad to hear that you won't be sleeping in your car tonight, because that sounds like it would be a little bit much. But what what was it like? Can you take us back to what it was like when you were driving through all of this, and how you got stuck, and how you missed some of those slides? It must have been a pretty scary time.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, it was sort of smooth sailing out of Kelowna when we heard Highway 5 was closed, and then down 3A was pretty good, but then or 5A, and then when we hit 3, it really turned sort of spooky. It was dark, it was wet, there were accidents, and then we managed to hit this enormous pothole and blew out our front tire and had to pull over along with about 20 or 30 other cars. And that was the beginning of it. Once we got that fixed and helped some other people, we got to Hope, and it was pitch black, absolutely pitch black. They had a complete and total blackout. So they rerouted us away from Route 1 and down Highway 7. And we thought, okay, we're going to make it now. But the rain was pouring. There were puddles everywhere. And that's when we came to the complete stop. So the slide had just happened, and we had stopped. And we sat there for a little while.
We sat there for about 3 hours. And then we heard that the Rickies was open. And we turned around and came up. And it was flooding. The roads were flooding. We almost didn't make it through the roads. And so we ended up sheltering there with probably about 300 other people.
Yep.
They had a generator.
Wow. So you've already been through a heck of a lot in the last few days. Do you have any concerns, though, about what's to come, perhaps about food supply or gas supply?
Yes. We managed to get to the Save-On yesterday morning, and it was already pretty slim. By last night, we saw pictures. There's nothing there. The owner of the service station, he's been going to all the trucks that are parked behind him, asking if they have any perishable food. He's been trying to feed us. We've had some donations from the Trans Mountain Pipeline crews. There is very little here, and without trucks coming through, they're going to run out of food soon. And fuel. People are, hoarding fuel because we've got to get out of here too. So it's a bit concerning.
It sure sounds that way. Well, we hope that you have a better sleep tonight, and that you get home safe and sound sooner rather than later. But I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. That's Greg Robbins and his family. They've been staying at an Esso station, but they've been taken in with a family in Hope, BC tonight.
More than 200 Chilliwack residents operations staff and Chilliwack firefighters showed up to protect that piece of infrastructure. Together, they built a 25-meter long sandbag wall to protect.
That is the mayor of Chilliwack, BC, praising residents and city workers for helping to protect the Barrowtown pump station. It sits between Chilliwack and Abbotsford, and that station is working furiously to pump water from the low-lying flooded Sumas Prairie. The mayor says the neighborhood of Chilliwack that's near the Barrowtown pumping station is under evacuation order as well. He said 90% of residents in the area have left their homes.
Here's what you can expect to make news tonight. In a couple of hours at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, the mayor of Abbotsford will provide an update on the flood emergency. We are also expecting to hear from Prime Minister Trudeau in the next 20 minutes. He's in Washington, and he's attending the Canadian American Business Council's 27th annual State of the Relationship Gala. And next on CBC News Network, Power and Politics, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland will be live. And we'd like to make a note of a correction to some of our flood coverage this afternoon. We reported earlier that evacuated residents of Princeton are able to return to the community to survey damage but cannot stay. That was incorrect information. The town of Princeton has confirmed that evacuated residents have not been given the go-ahead to return to their homes for any reason. We're going to keep you updated on the situation in Princeton and across BC. Anita, thank you for joining us in this special 2-hour coverage of the state of emergency that has been now declared in the province. Stay with us here on CBC News Network. Up next is Power and Politics.
Hi there, this is Power and Politics. I'm Katie Simpson. A state of emergency is declared in British Columbia. While the rain has stopped, the consequences of the catastrophic storm are coming into sharper focus.
This is an across